Hi, this is Mark from the YouTube channel Skywagon University, and now we're going to be doing podcasts interviewing people with interesting stories in aviation. And our first guest today is Trevor Wright, the great-great-great-grandson of the Wright brothers from famous bicycle making in Kill Devil Hills, but not quite.
I hope there's a family connection, but I'm not sure there is one.
But we've known each other in England since when? 30 years ago?
About 30 years ago, I used to go out with your brother's ex-girlfriend.
Awkward. But the topic of this podcast is that Trevor has not always been a pilot, although is now a commercial pilot. And what I wanted to do is talk to him about how he became a commercial pilot later in life at age...
I was 37 when I got my private pilot's license. And then I was 42 when I got my commercial pilot's license. So I had a previous career in film and television. And I got to a point where I'd been living in Los Angeles, working as an executive there. Got through the ranks, was in Hollywood Reporter's Who's Who and Where at one point. And I was working 25 hours a day, 8 days a week. And I just needed an excuse to turn my BlackBerry off.
In film?
In film. I was working in film in Hollywood, in Los Angeles.
And you threw all that in to become a pilot?
Fraction of the salary. I went to work for a regional carrier in the end. That was my first proper airline job. And I was on 10% of what I was on in the film industry.
Why though?
Because I love flying. I loved the focus. I loved the task orientation of it. The fact that when you finished, the job was done. When you landed, the plane was away in the hangar, the logbook filled out, the tech book filled out, and your uniform on the hangar, your job was finished.
You're not calling Australia and Korea at 2 a.m. to sell a movie.
Exactly. And you make a movie, there's always the next movie that's got to be made, and the next one after that, and it just felt like a never-ending job. So flying gave me an enormous amount of satisfaction.
So how did you start? What was your thinking about, I just want to fly for fun, a little plane, or did you know you wanted to go full-on jets?
I wanted to go full-on jets. I always knew I wanted to go full-on jets. It started way back when I was 23 and I joined the BBC, and there was a flying club there. The flying club was at Denham, just outside of London, and in a year, turning up to fly a Slingsby T67C, I managed to do 10 hours. And
in a year?
And it was always something against me. There was the weather would be bad, the plane would be tech, nobody would have called me to tell me the plane was tech. And I just found it a very frustrating process. And I realized I couldn't do that and work at the same time. So I stopped for a while.
When I learned to fly, I thought I'd never go commercial. I only wanted to fly small planes. And I've never gone further. So what's interesting is how you started to fly. Do you remember that nasty old rental warrior you droned up here from Van Nuys to visit to say, I've got 26 hours cross country, and then the next thing you know, you're flying the big stuff. How did the process go?
Well, I was flying those nasty rental warriors up here to try and give you confidence to trust me to be your ferry pilot.
Yeah, get a few more hours, son.
Yeah, keep going, get a few more hours. And then I rented a 182 to prove that I could fly the bigger stuff. And I came to see you in Pismo Beach when you were camping once.
Oh yeah.
And I came up in a 182, and I got to about 500 hours.
How far was that from Van Nuys? 12 miles.
About an hour and a half.
Yeah.
A terrifying hour and a half. And I got to about 500 hours, and then you finally trusted me to go off and do ferry flights for you. It started off locally in California, and then we got further and further, and picking up something from Texas, picking up something from Florida.
The Mooney from Florida.
Came all the way across with it. By the time I came back, I was the Mooney guy.
Yeah, self-checkout en route.
Yep, exactly.
So you started ferrying at how many hours?
So I got to 500 hours, started ferrying for you, and I got to 1100 hours, and then I went to get my commercial pilot's license. So
in England?
No, in America. I did it at Van Nuys, and I got my commercial pilot's license. And off the back of that, I got myself into a PC-12.
Oh yeah.
And I flew that up and down the west coast. We take it as far down as Cabo, as far north.
For people who are listening who don't know what that is, that's a single-engine turboprop corporate.
Exactly. It's a single-engine turboprop. Seats about 6 people in the back. Pressurized. It's like a single-engine King Air.
Right.
Exactly the same engine as a King Air, but like a single-engine King Air.
Just one. Yeah.
And but our bread and butter with that was Vegas and back. We do a lot of Vegas and back. sometimes twice in a day. It's a bit of a gamble, but we thought we'd have a go. Going way back in the day, I remember when you got your pilot's license and you came back from California, and I was still seeing your brother's ex-girlfriend, and we went for a flight from Enstone, and it was an old wartime Nissan hut with a tea-splattered kettle.
Oh yeah, and in Oxfordshire in England.
Exactly. And then we went for a flight around your mother's house, and you handed me a really nice SLR camera.
Film
camera, not digital, back in the day. And you said, take a picture of my mother's house for me, will you? And he circled around a couple of times, and at the end of it I said, I think there'll be one that's good out of that lot. He said, how many have you taken? I went, I used the whole film, 36 shots.
Because you're in the business, so just rattle them off, choose one later.
Yeah, don't worry about the cost.
Yeah.
So from the PC-12, I then went back to England.
So, but going back, so jumping from the small piston singles into the turboprops, what's the crewing? What's the pilot in command, co-pilot? What's the...
Well, the PC-12 can be flown single pilot, and a lot of the time it is, but sometimes the insurance company for the man in the back wants to have two pilots in the front. So it's a requirement. So quite often these are flown as multi-crew aircraft.
So you're building hours, turbine hours, but you're crewing and being paid?
Crewing and being paid. I was being paid $50 a day back then.
But no other work?
No other work. I'd left the film industry at that point. Flying for you as a ferry pilot, flying the PC-12. Then I went back to the UK and I did my air transport pilot's license exams, the ATPLs, which is the same as the ATP exam over here, except in England there's 14 of them.
And at what age did you get your ATP?
I got my writtens completed by the age of 43. I couldn't get the ATPL completed until I had 1,500 hours total time with approximately 500 hours multi-crew time. So I had to fly for a small regional airline in the UK.
So were you concerned that being with 20 years of service left, that you're entering the business a bit late?
A lot of people said you can't do it. It won't happen. There was a lot of naysayers.
Well, because you wouldn't be hired.
Because I wouldn't get hired. Nobody would trust me. Old dog, new tricks.
Coordination issues.
Exactly. Which still exist today. A lot of people said you can't do it. Save your money. Don't waste your time. And I pushed on. And I'm glad I did.
And then what happens if you're two crew in a plane and the captain's 23?
That happens an awful lot. That's actually a very popular interview question is, can you take orders from somebody that's 20 years younger than you? And the answer is yes, of course. They're going to have more experience than I am. I've got a lot to learn from them. My first job was in a Saab 2000, which was a lovely aircraft. I used to fly that for a company called...
Is that the one that's around the back of the hangar?
On the bricks. Sitting on railway sleepers with the undercarriage ripped off.
Is it still in the air?
It's still flying.
Okay.
It's still flying in spite of my best efforts.
So the Saab 2000, who's that?
That was for Eastern Airways. And I used to fly that from Norwich to Aberdeen with oil workers twice a day, up and down. That was a hard grind. And I did that
weather.
and weather. Bad weather in Scotland. And I did that, and the next time I went into the simulator for one of my recurrents, once I had all the hours I needed, I was able to do my ATPL check ride off the back of that. And that's when my ATPL was issued.
So for people watching, once you've got an ATPL, now you're open market available commercial. You can be hired by anybody. Every
time you get a little bit more time, a few more hours, you go up a notch. You might not be making command, might not be making captain just yet, but there is a relaxation from a future employer that you have the competence and they then therefore have the confidence to hire you. So
sticking with ATP for a minute, in England there's a frozen ATPL where you can get the license but not be qualified yet.
Yes.
Well, how does that work?
When I finished the written exams, technically I had a frozen ATPL. And it became unfrozen when I had the prerequisite number of night hours and the prerequisite number of multi-crew hours.
When can you take the ATPL and have it be frozen?
You can't. It's frozen from the point you finish your written exams. It unfreezes when you get into a simulator and you take your ATPL test or
At
exam.
X number of hours.
At X number of hours.
1,500?
No, I can't remember the exact numbers now. There's a certain number of multi-crew, there's a certain number of night time, and the aircraft has to be over a certain weight.
And is that the same as the ATP here?
The ATP here is
In America.
different in America. Sorry, we're in America right now. The ATP here is different. You have to do a CTP course, which stands for Certified Training Program, and this came about after the Colgan Air crash in February 2009, when the FAA deemed the pilots not to be inexperienced enough. And
Was that PC-12?
No, that was a Q400 they put through the roof of a house in Buffalo, unfortunately. Killed everybody on
in
board.
the snowstorm.
Yeah, and everybody on the house. They had icing issues and there were also fatigue issues, but the thing that Congress really focused on was their experience. So they determined there had to be a CTP course, Certified Training Program, and you had to complete that before you could do your ATP written exam. And the CTP course is 3 days in a classroom and then 2 days in a simulator. And it's a very good course, and I actually enjoyed it. I did mine 2 years ago with the view of coming back to America to work at some point. And I did mine in Ohio, and it was like a first officer fundamentals course all over again. It was a bit of a refresher. I really enjoyed it, and I think people shouldn't be against it. They should embrace it.
Yeah, for safety. But so prices on these things, these different exams, courses, not just rental of aircraft.
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody was thinking of becoming a commercial pilot in their 40s,
it's going to cost you a lot of money. The airline programs aren't around at the moment to help people through. There's talk that they might have cadet schemes to help bring the pilot numbers up because it's very low at the moment. But by and large, you're looking at being self-funded.
so you've got to pay for it, hoping that you get the job at the end that pays you back.
Yes. And with...
How's it going?
With my initial PPL, with converting that to a CPL IR multi-engine in Van Nuys, to then coming across to Britain and doing my ATPL writtens, and then paying for my first type rating, I am over $100,000 in self-funding training. So make no doubt about how much it's going to cost you to make yourself employable.
But when you're a captain in a corporate jet, how long until it take to pay that back?
The very early jobs with the regional airlines will pay you maybe £30,000 a year in the UK. I don't know what it is in America. I think it's quite a lot more now because of the pilot shortage. When you get experience and you rise through the ranks, it won't take long before 100,000 in training debt is inconsiderable.
Right. And what are you doing now?
Well, right now, I went through the Saab 2000 with one regional airline. I got onto an Embraer 145 with another regional airline.
And what? Describe it.
The 145, it's a long dart-shaped aircraft, twin-engine, T-tail. It's also known as a Legacy 650 as a private jet. And nice aircraft. As an airliner, I don't think it was very good.
A true jet, small commuter airliner.
True jet, small commuter airliner, 38 seats in the back. And I flew that around Europe for a regional operator. We did ACMI work for Lufthansa, so I was based in Munich quite a lot.
ACMI?
I don't know the
All these pilots
ACMI.
use all these abbreviations.
I mean, we use all these abbreviations, and for the life of me, I can't remember what they are. I think it's Aircraft Crew Maintenance Insurance. So you hand it over to a third party to fly, and you fly with their call sign. Even though you're not branded as them, you're flying on behalf of them.
Okay.
So ACMI work, I did that for Lufthansa and LOT.
And where were you? What were your destinations and routes?
So I'd be Munich down to Bergamo in Italy. I'd be Munich up to Norrköping in Sweden. I would do Groningen in Netherlands. People are going to write in and say I haven't pronounced that properly, by the way. Groningen to Copenhagen. From Bristol to Paris, Amsterdam, the usual main European hubs. But you're not a proper pilot until you've been made redundant at least twice.
So you never get the first, because that's a very good point I was going to mention, because the plan you have at the beginning, working your way up through, is never the route that gets you to the end result that you want, because you can't plan it on the way.
You can't plan it all the way. There'll be all sorts of factors that get in the way.
Yeah.
So Eastern Airways, they closed my base down in Norwich. I took redundancy. I went to BMI Regional. The airline folded. I took redundancy. From there, I got into private jets, and I worked for a preeminent fractional jet operator that has an office in the United States, but also offices in Europe.
So they're not privately owned. They own. Lots of owners own pieces of them, and they charter them as required.
Exactly. You've got
And
that.
what kind of plane was it?
I was flying a Phenom 300.
A what?
It was made
Phenom.
Phenom. Sorry, for our American audience, a Phenom 300 made by Embraer, and that flew like a jet-powered Seneca. It was great. It was like a little dart. If you didn't pitch 20 degrees nose up on takeoff, you'd have the speed tape overspeed warning going off with the flaps out. You had to really fly that carefully, and it was great.
What was its range and its passenger capability?
Range we tend to talk about in terms of endurance rather than physical range, because one day you might be able to make 2,000 miles, and the next day if you've got a headwind it's only going to be 1,500 miles. So that had a 5-hour range, 5-hour endurance.
At what speeds?
We were limited to Mach 7, 8. So when you get above 33,000 feet, you start to do your speed in a percentage of the speed of sound. So we were Mach 7, 8. That was what we were limited to. But we could go up to flight level 450, which is 45,000 feet. So that was good.
Do they have a coffin corner?
They do have a coffin corner. Every jet has a coffin corner.
And that's
Best avoided. That's probably another podcast for coffin corner, but
just basically that's where you're too high for the speed and it'll stall in cruise.
you'll get to a point where the speed, if you go too fast, you'll break the sound barrier, but if you go too slowly, you'll stall, and it gets to be a pinnacle.
And the sound barrier, you're just not allowed to.
You're not allowed
It's
to.
not. You could do it aerodynamically, but you're not allowed to.
Potentially aerodynamically, but the aircraft might not be stressed for the initial buffets as you go through it. So you wouldn't want to. And then coming back from breaking the sound barrier will also put continued stresses onto the aircraft. So
Yeah, it's something that we piston people like to say over a coffin corner, but I don't know what it is.
exactly, coffee and a donut. You read about it in an NTSB report.
Right. So you were flying for that fractional jet
Ownership.
business. Yeah.
So I did that for 3 years. I got to 1,000 hours. And then from there,
1,000 hours in them.
In them.
So by now you've got 2,500.
Phenom 300. I got 2,500 hours at that point. And then I came out and I got into a Challenger 605, which I absolutely loved. Big, able to go across the Atlantic. The destinations became more interesting.
What's its like engines, seating, number, size, just to give people an idea?
Seats 8. It's got 2 engines on the back, much larger
Only
cabin.
8?
Seats 8. Depends on the configuration, but you don't want to crowd yourself. If you've got the money for a private jet, you don't want to be all crowded in. You want the space to be able to move around and have some space. And 8 seats makes for 4 beds. So it's nice. It's comfortable. 2 big engines, CFM 56 M5s on the back. 8,700 pounds of thrust. Exactly the same engine as the A10 Tank Buster, which I know is a favourite of yours.
Favourite plane?
Yeah.
Is it really? That's the same engine?
Same engine. Great low level, not so good higher up.
What's the point with an A10?
Yeah.
You don't spend a lot of time up there.
Exactly.
So by now, so right up to today, how many hours you got?
I'm 3,335 hours, and I'm about to go work for another fractional jet ownership, which is competition for my previous employer, flying the Challenger 605 for.
And if you don't mind me asking, you're how old now?
I'm 54.
So 54, you got 3,500 hours. You've already been flying commercially. What do you see, having started late? How far are you going to go?
But the next big goal for me would be to make command. So hopefully I can do that in the next couple of years. I need to be with one employer and build a relationship. And with command, that will, if I can get 500 hours command, that'll make me more employable by other people, and I'll be able to bounce around maybe and find another job somewhere else at some point, if I wanted to.
And then, but you've been like older than the crew on your way up. As you get towards the end, you'll be the older guy who's the captain.
My hours and my experience will be commensurate with my age.
And your pay.
And my pay will finally be commensurate with my desires.
So if you were commercial, would you want to do commercial airlines?
The problem is I did airlines, and all you ever saw were the back of your passengers' heads as they got off. You were heads down programming the FMS and doing the load sheets as they boarded. The cockpit doors closed, and you just never saw anybody. You didn't get any interaction. Whereas flying private jets, you go back. 3 things when you fly a private jet: know what you're flying over, how long to destination, and what the weather's doing at destination, because you're going to be asked as you go through the cabin.
Right.
But you get to chat, and I've had some remarkable people in the back of my plane. I've had film stars, I've had magnates of industries, I've had politicians, musicians, which has been very amusing at times when they give you tickets for their concert.
How's the plane when you get to the destination? Is it trashed?
It depends. It depends. Sometimes some people are very respectful. Some people it's their home. I have flown for private owners, and nobody else goes in the aircraft. And after the galley, you have to take your shoes off because they don't want you on their carpet and your outside shoes. It's their living room, or an extension of.
Quite right. On if somebody was watching this or listening and thinking, I'm 30, I want to be a commercial pilot, what's your advice?
My advice would be, go fly. Go get your pilot's license. There are a number of different ways you can do it. You can go to a zero to hero school, where they'll take you from 0 hours and spit you out with about 200 hours with a multi-engine commercial pilot's license with an instrument rating. In America, you still have to get above 750 hours if you're with a certified school. But if you've put it together the way I have, you have to be over 1,500 hours now to be able to get your ATP issued. In Europe, there are schools that will take you all the way through. They're a little bit more elegant. They use a Latin name and they call it ab initio, meaning to begin.
From the beginning.
And they'll take you all the way through. That tends to be about £120,000 undertaking now.
So $150,000, $60,000.
But I think I've had more experience by putting it together myself and flying different aircraft, working with different people.
And so on that subject, employers looking at your resume, if you've spent 1,500 hours in a 152 doing touch and goes at Van Nuys, or you've ferried across the country and had 3 or 4 jobs and flown 7 or 8 different jets, they're going to hire the guy with the more varied experience, right?
They'll hire the guy with the more varied experience.
The person.
Correct. They'll hire the person with the more varied experience. However, sometimes they like the product from the schools because then they're airline ready. A big part of this is multi-crew cooperation, or crew resource management, MCC or CRM. Aviation got as safe as it was going to get in the 80s with triple redundancy on hydraulic systems and electrical, but planes were still crashing. And they worked out the 2 soft fleshy things in the front were the things that were still making planes crash.
Worst thing you can put in a plane?
A pilot. And they decided, they didn't decide, they mandated that we had to do a CRM course every year, and initially do a multi-crew cooperation course.
And the CRM course?
Crew resource management.
Exactly, yeah.
So we spent a lot of time reviewing accidents and what went wrong, what the human factors were, and we've learned by that. And that's brought us up into a world where just a couple of years ago we had 0 hull losses, which is a fantastic place to be.
0 hull losses?
Yeah.
In 1 year?
In 1 year we had 0 hull
Meaning
losses.
airliners, commercial?
Meaning commercial airliners had an accident-free year. Now, it wasn't 100% accident-free. There would have been minor things like wingtips clipping light poles, but by and large, in terms of the safety for you as an end-user passenger, we got to our safest point a couple of years ago.
And how's it going at the moment with automation? What do you see happening there commercially going forward?
Automation is a very interesting subject. At the moment we embrace automation, and it reduces our pilot workload, reduces our fatigue, but it can also destroy our situational awareness, and we cannot know exactly where we are, or...
You're just a passenger if you don't pay attention.
Exactly. The autopilot will do what you tell it to do. You have to fly the autopilot, and there's a big push post Air France 447 to not be so reliant on the
Is that the one that went into the ocean?
That was the Air France flight going from Rio to Paris that disappeared in the ocean. It went through the intertropical convergence zone over the equator, had some bad storms, pitot tubes iced up, and they lost a lot of their flight information on the cockpit. They didn't know what to believe or not, but they basically flew a perfectly working aircraft into the sea. All lives lost. It took 2 years for them to be able to find the aircraft. But once they found the aircraft and we listened to the black box, we had an awful lot of lessons that we learned from it on how we work together, how we communicate, and that's been part of the making it accident-free as best we can.
Do you think we're ever going to get to a point where there's a plane on the ramp, passengers in it, and no pilots?
Do you want to fly on it? I don't.
Not today, as Tom Cruise said in Top Gun 2.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Can I just talk about one thing that gave me the most pleasure in my life in aviation, in my career so far? When I came back to England, and I'd finished my ATPLs, I found it very hard to get my first airline job. So I worked as a pilot assistant on a King Air ambulance. And we flew all over Europe, picking up people and bringing them home, repatriating them after they'd been stabilized in hospital. And that gave me the greatest sense of work satisfaction because I was helping people.
Yeah, that was the King Air out of Exeter.
That was the King Air based out of Exeter. So we'd start in Exeter, we'd fly down to maybe Tenerife. It could be either a little old lady who had a stroke or somebody who fell off a scooter that they hired for their holiday. And then we'd come back up and we'd take them back to their hospital, which would be nearest to them at home. So it could have been Birmingham, could have been Aberdeen, and then afterwards we would return to Exeter.
How did you get that job as a low-time, first-time turboprop guy?
I networked and talked to a lot of people.
So it wasn't planned in advance, it just happened?
It was an opportunity that came up. A friend of mine had been doing it already, and he very kindly, when he got his first jet job, handed it over to me.
Oh, okay. I know somebody that was a fueler at a big corporate airport, an FBO, just pumping fuel. Like the company, like the people like it, and he was put through his entire course, and I saw him like 4 years later, came in here in a King Air, flying it.
Brilliant.
From pumping gas.
Brilliant.
Now, so you cannot plan it. So just to wind it up, in conclusion, older pilot starting off, you'd say go for it, but be ready for the financial impact of it.
I'd say be ready for the financial impact. It's going to take some time to make it happen, but as an older pilot, you can do it. And I know people who are being hired well into their 50s for their first airline job now, because obviously there's a pilot shortage, and you can do it. Have the confidence.
And if you were older and you bought like a piston engine single just to have fun and fly, a lot of people would say to me when they're buying a plane is, I'm going to see if I can make some money with this. That is not how you make money with it. You can't.
That's not how you make money with it. To quote Richard Branson, if you want to make a small pile of cash in the airline industry, start off with a big pile of cash.
Yeah. If you want to make $1 million, start with 2.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to say something else to follow on from the King Air job. So from the King Air job...
That was the Exeter Medivac early on, yeah.
From the King Air ambulance job doing the Medivac, although that paid me £50 a day, and I was driving down to Exeter to be able to do it, spending the night in a hotel the night before, I was paying to work, but it kept me airways current, and it kept me in the game with my instrument rating. And from that, in one of my job interviews, the chief pilot said, I can tell you're dedicated.
Because you can't get King Air time.
No, you can't buy King Air time.
You can't rent it. So you were getting it for free, but it was costing a little bit in hotels and petrol, gas.
But I got free time. Now I couldn't log that because in England the King Air requires a type rating, whereas it doesn't require one in the United States. But the fact that I was dedicated made a big deal for him.
Yeah.
And he knew that I wasn't going to be a flaky pilot that just came in, I'm not into this, and left again.
To start off and have a career change, you can't just think, I might like that. You've got to actually want to do it and be prepared to go right through and finish it. Otherwise you're going to spend a lot of money and then drift.
You have to love it.
And do you fly the small stuff still?
I still fly the small stuff. And I like to remember what it's all about. And there's nothing better than flying the small stuff. I remember coming up and flying for you a couple of years ago and looking at the seat next to me and seeing it was empty and going, whoa, where's the other guy gone?
Keep me alive.
Yeah, I've got to do this all by myself. Anyway, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been interesting. And it's our first podcast. So I hope you enjoyed it. And this is Mark from Skywagon's podcast, doing a podcast. First one, we're probably going to evolve as it goes, but this was very interesting. Trev, thanks very much.
Thank you.